And we are live. Good morning, everyone. I hope you are happy and healthy wherever you are. It's my great pleasure to have Athy Le Roux, who started Eden Recovery Center. And Athy's had quite an incredible journey. Welcome, Athy.
Thank you. Thanks, Warren. It's great to be on your show.
Thanks for being here. I'm really looking forward to this interview so that we can educate people about how you are using amino acids and how you are helping people balance their amino acids and how that is restoring mental health to people with things like addictions and mental illness, depression and anxiety, etc., etc. So let's just get straight into it. How did you get to where you are today? You've been on quite a journey to be where you are today, and what you're doing right now and where you're going. So how did you get to where you are today, to this, to what you're doing?
Well, Warren, I had a husband who was an alcoholic and I couldn't get him sober. So I was pulling out my hair. I couldn't understand how somebody who was so intelligent and so, with such a big heart could become this monster. And
he's a great guy.
And it didn't matter what we did, how many psychiatrists we went to, how many doctors, how many counselors, how many rehabs. I mean, he had been in and out of rehab. And I just couldn't understand why somebody like him would be so compulsed to actually continue in that kind of behavior. I needed to understand how the brain functioned that would make a person do that. So for me, when I looked at him, it was more than just a behavior. There was a physicality to it that I couldn't understand. And I needed to understand that in order for him to help himself and for us to have a family. Because without my husband, we wouldn't be a family.
Yeah. I suppose anybody who suddenly wakes up and realizes they've got an addict or an alcoholic in the family, it's quite traumatic. It's quite traumatic for them. It's quite a big wake-up call. And there's a massive education process that goes. You've got to educate yourself as the family member or the codependent. And
so, I mean, that's really the issue.
You took it to the max. You started a rehab in the process.
Well, I knew the behavior was inappropriate and it was hurtful for himself and for us, but I knew there was more to it. So I started Eden 12 years ago with some knowledge. It wasn't, I mean, everybody did the 12 steps and, all that kind of stuff. But so when we started Eden, I wanted to really understand, not just from a behavioral perspective, but from a physicality perspective, what was happening within the brain that resulted in a person being so compulsed to use. So in a nutshell, the pathology of addiction is two factors. The one is that the person who suffers from addiction has a nucleocumbent in the brain that is sensitive and releases dopamine much more easier than a person who does not have doesn't have a sensitive nucleocumbent. The second thing is, if you're releasing too much dopamine, that means your serotonin base is going to be lower. And you would think, well, what is the problem with that? Well, the problem with that is serotonin is the only thing that can stop dopamine. So that's saying once an alcoholic, always an alcoholic. What they don't explain is the reason for that is that it's a physical reason, that you have the neurotransmitter dopamine releasing too much dopamine, which then the ratios of serotonin and dopamine have to be equal. So once you understand that, then you can understand why they cannot stop. Once they start, they cannot stop. That's the physical aspect of it. But it's far more complex than that. So when we look at addiction, when Eden looks at addiction, we see addiction as a physical problem that manifests in a behavior. And let me explain what that means. So if you can't sleep, okay, because you don't have melatonin in the brain, and this is the best way of me explaining it. I can give you sleep therapy till kingdom come. I can tell you to drink chamomile tea and keep your room cool and have a hot bath and don't get too hot at night, you know, don't watch horror movies. I can do that till kingdom come. You're still not going to be able to sleep. Yeah. The problem is when the brain associates a drug with feeling better, because there's an advantage to using drugs. When you're not feeling great and you're feeling stressed or you agitated or fearful or depressed and you drink a glass of wine, you know, it takes the edge off. That's the advantage. The problem is that the brain then connects that drug to feeling better. So this is where the behavioral aspect of addiction comes in. And of course, when the person is in active addiction, the behavior in most cases is absolutely atrocious, which then causes emotional ramifications. So it's not just one thing. So mental illness, and when I look at mental illness, I look at it as if you can't sleep, you have a mental illness. If you're agitated, you have a mental illness. If you're depressed, you have a mental illness. If you're feeling down and feeling unmotivated, that's all signs that your neurotransmitters in the brain are not stable. They're not functioning as they should.
Yeah.
And that sort of led me down a rabbit hole. So understanding what these neurotransmitters did, I needed to understand, okay, so how do we stabilize neurotransmitters? So in most cases, people will go to a psychiatrist or to their doctor. They'll give them a little pill, and yes, it will work in the beginning. But what happens is as a person progresses, they need more and more of these anti-anxieties, sleeping tablets, antidepressants. They become dependent on these psychiatric drugs, and these psychiatric drugs are not making them well. They're actually making them worse. And there's a reason for that. So when a person takes psychiatric drugs, and what I'm not saying is that there's no place for them, because there's definitely a place for psychiatric drugs, but when it comes to addiction, as a temporary intervention, but when it comes to addiction, there's no place for psychiatric drugs, like none whatsoever. First of all, addiction mimics psychiatric behavior. That's the first thing. So you can't say somebody's psychiatric unless they're off everything, and then you can properly evaluate them. That's the first thing. The second thing is it becomes a crutch. These drugs also deplete a thing called tryptophan. So tryptophan is an amino acid that actually makes serotonin, and it also makes melatonin. So if you don't have tryptophan, you're not going to be able to make serotonin, and you're not going to be able to make melatonin. So in other words, you're going to be depressed and you can't sleep. And as we know, a lot of people who suffer from depression and people who are addicts suffer from not being able to sleep. So now tryptophan is an amino acid that actually only comes from food. You can't get it anywhere else. So we've got 22 amino acids, of which none of them are essential, which means that you cannot get it from anywhere else but from food. There's certain ones that are conditional and other ones that your body can make. The irony of all of this is that you can't actually metabolize anything, including those amino acids or the food that you eat, unless you have bacteria that are doing the job that they're supposed to be doing, and that you have the cofactors to create that chemical process to make them into the amino acids that are required to make neurotransmitters. So, for example, we have two amino acids. The one is tryptophan, as I said, and the other one is phenylalanine. And now these amino acids.
Say that again.
It's phenyl. I know it's a very difficult name. Phenylalanine. I can spell it.
Phenylalanine.
Alanine. Alanine. Phenylalanine.
Phenylalanine.
Okay. That makes tyrosine, And tyrosine makes L-DOPA, and L-DOPA makes dopamine, and dopamine makes norepinephrine. So now what happens, and then tryptophan on the other side makes 5-HTP, which then makes serotonin, and then makes melatonin in the end. Now, in order for that to make the dopamine and the serotonin, you need cofactors. First of all, you need bacteria. You need the food, then you need the bacteria. So you need E. coli in order to start breaking down these amino acids. So I know lots of people will think of E. coli as being a harmful bacteria. It's only harmful if there's too much of it.
Okay.
Then, in order to go from food to the first phase of tryptophan, when you're making serotonin, is you need zinc, okay, you need B6, and you need B1.
Okay.
So that's not going to happen if you're not eating correctly. So what do addicts do? They don't eat.
They don't eat, yeah.
And what do? They eat processed foods, sugary stuff, refined carbohydrates, cold drinks, energy drinks. None of that stuff is going to create the methylation that is required to make these amino acids.
And most of that food is going to kill good bacteria.
That's correct. So bacteria needs to eat. You need to eat specific foods to make it grow. If you're eating the wrong
psychiatric medicine, it's also going to kill the good bacteria.
Exactly. So what happens is that it's like baking a cake. I always use this as an analogy because people can understand. So what do you need when you bake a cake? You need a recipe. You need a chef. You need flour. You need cocoa, vanilla, sugar, baking powder, and then you need an oven. So it's the same with the human body. So we need a recipe, which is in our DNA, and in some cases, the recipe is faulty. So you have a genetic problem with metabolism of specific amino acids or specific cofactors that will affect the brain. So I'll give you an example of, 40% of schizophrenics suffer from a thing called pyroluria. So pyroluria is something, it's a synthesis of hemoglobin, and we all have it. But they, for some reason, make too much of it. And that attaches itself to zinc and B6. And the body gets rid of it through urine. So in order to kind of counteract that, you would give that person high doses of zinc and vitamin B6. So that's the first, so there could be a genetic disorder. The second thing is you might not have enough, so you might not have the correct chef, and the chefs are the bacteria, right? Because they have to mix everything together. The flour is your amino acids, your cofactors are your baking powder and all of those, the sugar, the egg, and all that kind of stuff. And then your oven is your GI tract. If any of those things are missing or damaged in some way, so let's say you have a permeable gut because of parasites, it's not going to happen. Yeah. So you're going to be affected mentally. Your health is going to be affected. So it's not just about mental health. It's about health in general. It's going to create inflammation. And you're going to have an overgrowth of bad bacteria. So the one thing that's really important in addiction is what you put in your mouth. It's about the most important thing. So some of the most cofactors that are important for mental health are your B vitamins, and specifically vitamin B6, B12, and folate. Okay, vitamin C, zinc, magnesium, copper, iron. So all of these things are required to just have a healthy brain so you can get to sleep. If you look at the chemistry involved in just when you start eating something, it looks like a circuit board. It is the most amazing thing. The human body is unbelievable. And unfortunately, you know, medical doctors study medicine. So if you go for a headache, they'll give you a Panado.
Yeah, symptomatic treatment.
Exactly. So, but they're not looking at the cause. You know, is the headache because you're not drinking enough water? Do you have a brain tumor in your brain? Do you, you know, have you eaten, have you had too much coffee? You know,
they're not looking for the cause of the problem.
No. And that's really, so when we deal with a person suffering from addiction, the first thing we do is we wean them off all psychiatric drugs and replace it with amino acids. We do blood tests to ascertain their amino acid profile to see which amino acids are off, and then we use organic acids to see which pathways are affected, and if there's any parasites or anything that's stopping the metabolism of specific amino acids.
Sorry, I'm just trying to adjust my camera.
So we know, like, if somebody's low in serotonin, so that I can just, if you don't mind me, just reading you a list of somebody who has low serotonin.
Yeah.
So afternoon and evening cravings, negativity, depression, worry, anxiety, low self-esteem, social anxiety, obsessive thoughts or behavior, hyperactivity, okay, controlling perfectionism, winter blues, irritability, rage, dislike hot water, panic attacks, phobias, fears of heights, small places, snakes, social phobias, fibromyalgia, and other pain, and then we have suicidal thoughts. So you can see that's just a little inkling of a person that might be suffering from low serotonin. So if they have any of those things, then it's a possibility that that's the case. When we talk about the catecholamines, which is your dopamine and all that kind of stuff, we're talking about cravings for stimulation of sugar, chocolate, caffeine, cocaine, meth, depression, apathy. Because remember, dopamine is, when you're low in dopamine, you're not going to be motivated to do anything. And this is when we talk about dopamine exhaustion. So remember, when you sleep, dopamine gets replenished. Now, if a person has got low serotonin, they're not going to have melatonin, so they're going to battle to sleep. So what happens is that you're constantly spiking dopamine without replenishing it. So eventually the world starts looking a bit gray. You're not enjoying the things that you enjoyed before. Your friends are not, like, you don't want to spend time with your friends and your family or watch your favorite show or do some cooking or gardening. All of a sudden, all that motivation's gone. So there's lack of energy, lack of drive, easily bored, lack of focus and concentration, ADD. So that's a kind of a real inkling into a person that actually has low dopamine. Low GABA. So GABA is one of the other neurotransmitters, and this is like you crave carbohydrates, alcohol, drugs for relaxation because you're constantly uptight, okay? You feel stressed and burnt out. You're unable to relax or loosen up. Your muscles are all tense. You often feel overwhelmed, and that's also an indication of low GABA. So if you start asking yourself these questions, and then you'll be able to see, in low endorphins, you crave comfort, reward, numbing treats. You love certain foods and behaviors, drugs or alcohol. Sensitivity to emotional, physical pain. You cry a lot. So you can see how all those neurotransmitters are really, if they are stabilized, and all of them are stabilized through food. So nutrition is about the most important thing in an addict's life.
So if somebody is identifying with what you're talking about right now, and they're saying, "Wow, geez, you're describing me in a nutshell now," what would be the first step in terms of sorting out this problem? Would they need, I would say, a blood test? That would be the first step?
Yeah, so I mean, obviously we would need to do an assessment on them. The important thing is everybody's unique and different. So everybody's is handled in a different way, and their history, their family history, what they like to eat, everything's, you know, so unique. So there's no sort of blanket thing that we use to help an individual. We need to understand their sleeping patterns, what they're doing, when they're eating, if there's any other emotional stresses in their life, what drugs are they using, what pharmaceutical drugs. And I mean, and the honest truth is it's not just psychiatric drugs that actually deplete vitamins and minerals, which are essential to metabolize amino acids. I mean, you can take, you know, people who have heartburn, for example. You know, people always think that heartburn is too much acid. Actually, it's too little acid. So, and when you take these antacids and stuff like that, what you're depleting is the cofactors that are required to make the amino acids and the neurotransmitters in the brain. So
the very thing that's supposed to be helping is harming you and causing the problem.
Yeah. So, I mean, in order to make, you know, the GABA pathway, for example, to actually eventually make GABA for, you know, you need to eat the food. All right. Then you need, remember, we need 2 different types of bacteria for GABA, which is different from tryptophan and different from dopamine. I mean, phenylalanine. Okay. Is that
there's that word again.
There's that word again. But you need lactose bacillica and bifidobacterium in order to actually make GABA. But you also need the cofactors. You need zinc, and you need B1, B3, B6. You also need stomach acid, and stomach acid is made from those particular cofactors.
So you're talking about doing a proper assessment, a blood test, and then there's a process in terms of removing these harmful drugs or whatever the person is ingesting, and then replacing it with proper nutrition.
Exactly. So, for example, like people have high blood pressure or high cholesterol. You know, that's the first sign of inflammation. Okay, that there's gut permeability. You know, your joints start to ache and all that kind of stuff. So we use high doses of niacin to bring both the cholesterol down and the blood pressure.
Niacin,
yeah. It's vitamin B3. So
vitamin B3.
So this is how we kind of look at the individual. We do an assessment. We do the blood tests, the plasma tests, and the organic acid tests. Once we've got the results back, it takes a bit of time because it's done through the University of Potchefstroom. You can't go to a normal lab to do it. Once we've got the results back and we've actually, you know, been able to see where the problems lie, then that gets given. So we do a proper assessment of the information that's come in. Then a compound is mixed specifically for that person that addresses, and they get put on a diet, specific diet.
What do you mean a compound? Are you talking about a supplement?
So it's a supplement. It's made out of amino acids and cofactors, specific for the person's needs. So they would take that for...
Based on the blood test?
Yes.
Okay.
So there's no guesswork. No, we're not guessing, you know, have a tablet. And then 6 weeks later you come back and say, well, how are you feeling? Well, you know, I need another tablet because this one didn't work, you know. And I think that's the problem with a lot of psychiatric, the printer's gone on its own.
Don't worry about it.
Sorry.
Life happens.
Yes, sorry about that. So then, you know, we also ascertain if the person's like lectin intolerant, because that would, food sensitivities also will play a big role in, how your food's actually digested. And if you are sensitive to specific foods, we need to know about that. If you have
that'll come from the blood test.
So the food sensitivities is not done through the blood tests. The food sensitivities is actually asking like 1 million questions, basically on different food types, and teaching the person to be.
I'm just in an interview online. I'll call you back, Jen. Apologies.
Yeah.
That was an
so I mean,
call,
so that's.
Anyway.
So
this will all come from the blood test.
So, well, the food sensitivities don't come from, there's specific other tests that can be done for food sensitivities, but the blood test is really to ascertain the amino acid profile. The organic acid test to understand why they're off kilter, because every methylation or the metabolism or synthesis of specific amino acids, there's always byproducts. So if the byproduct is too high or too low, then we know where the problem is coming into play. I mean, simplistic terms, actually. I mean, and I always say, if you have a petrol car and you put diesel in it, will the car go?
No.
If you're going to Durban and you only put half a tank in, will you arrive in Durban?
No.
So you need the right fuel and the right amount of fuel in order to get to your destination. And that's the same with the human body. We need to eat the right foods and the right amounts of foods in order for us to be healthy individuals.
Okay. And with a supplement as well, which is tailor-made based on your blood test results.
And, I mean, my husband's been clean for 12 years and, he couldn't sleep. He was the most aggressive drunk I had ever met. And I've dealt with a lot. Okay.
Yeah.
And I think right at the end of the, sorry, I switched it off because I'm online. Sorry.
We won't be long.
So his whole personality changed. They told me he had personality disorders. They told me he was schizophrenic. He was bipolar. I mean, if there was a term that could explain him away, that he had every single little title that you could possibly. The amount of psychiatrists, money that we spent on psychiatrists, psychologists, and the sad thing is that even in doctors and psychiatrists, still deem addiction as sort of bad behavior, something that's immoral, and they don't really study.
Yeah.
We've had psychiatrists working here, we've had psychologists and social workers, and none of them actually study addiction in university. It's something that they learn outside of the realms of formal study. And it's a pandemic. People are suffering. They really are. So for me,
psychiatry is not the
people can argue with me. They can argue with me, but for me, I think that addiction is a digestive problem. It's a gut problem. And if you fix that, you fix the brain.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, Athy, it's not something that, what you're talking about in the subject that we're dealing with today is not something that you could learn in a short 20-minute interview, but or 30-minute interview, or even an hour interview. It's a very interesting topic, and that's why I asked you to do this interview today, so that all of the people on our page, Athy Detox Clinic South Africa, and especially our practitioners, can understand the importance of considering working with somebody's amino acids and also assessing them properly first through
Yes.
a blood test so that we understand how this person is wired, what their shortfalls are, and how to address their situation in a structured, helpful approach that is going to have a lasting effect. That really
Yes.
was my intention for getting you to talk about your field of expertise, because I've seen the work that you do as a treatment center. You didn't get to where you are today, and you didn't get to where it is today by accident. There is somebody that is behind it, and that is you and all the people that have been working for Eden, but also I've seen it in Steve, your husband. I've seen, and I've met the man today, and he's a nice guy, you know.
He is.
And he's a calm. He's a calm man. He's not an aggressive
No,
man. He's a really nice man,
exactly.
you know. So that's come with a lot of hard work and a lot of research, and so I just want to say thank you for taking the time to do this interview today. For people that are seeing the end part now, Athy has agreed to teach a masterclass to our practitioners, which would be, you know, maybe a 1 hour intensive masterclass, so that we are better equipped to deal with our clients, and so that AcuDetox Clinic South Africa benefits, and all the practitioners who are involved benefits from it. Thank you so much, Athy.
It's a pleasure.
You've been an absolute blessing to me, and Eden Recovery Centers, where we have been teaching our course for the last 2 years. Has it been? About a year and a half, eh? And so thank you so much for the work that you do, and for the people that you've helped, and for taking the time to be here today, and for teaching the masterclass, which will be up and coming. Watch this space, folks. Thanks, Athy.
Thank you, Warren.
Have
Thanks,
an
guys.
awesome day.
Yeah, you
And
too.
bye-bye, guys. I really look forward to this masterclass. But wherever you are, however you've been watching, through whatever channel, have a beautiful and prosperous day wherever you are.